Hello and very warm welcome to the Arise interview, 60 minutes of big questions about the big stories from the news and beyond, with fresh insights and critical analyses. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, there is a debate on whether churches and mosques should reopen now as part of a gradual series of measures to return to normalcy. There might soon be a shift, and it will be about what will happen when churches and mosques are reopened. We may not be heading the ways things used to be. We'll be heading to a new chapter that requires a different approach called the new normal. We'll weigh in on this conversation and how to lead after the COVID-19 pandemic with John Cardinal Onaiyekan. And later, as the coronavirus pandemic brings world economies to their knees, virtually all sectors is badly hit, and the hospitality industry globally is not left out. We've seen an increase in cancellations of both individual reservations and group events, and hotels are almost looking deserted, if not empty. The million-dollar question is, will hotels survive COVID-19? We'll speak to the immediate past president and chief executive officer of Transcorp Hilton Hotel PLC. That's coming up in a moment. World leaders have adopted measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus, from lockdown restrictions, curfews, observing social distancing, setting up isolation and treatment centers, and prohibiting gatherings of more than 20 persons. It is not news in Nigeria that the protocols issued by the government made churches and mosques to stop converging. Not only religious bodies were affected, event centers, nightclubs, generally social gatherings have been banned due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, all around the world, most governments are easing lockdown restrictions for economic reasons as they closely monitor the situation. Markets are allowed to function for a certain time frame within the week, causing a debate on whether churches and even mosques shouldn't reopen or not.
There is something wrong for people to be allowed to be in the market for 6 hours and can't be in church for 2 hours. Man, it's an upside down way of looking at things. Amen. There is more hope for a poor and wise child than for an old foolish king who will no more be admonished. I can smell a rat. The Lord spoke to me on it so strong yesterday. I can smell a rat. Behind all this is how do we stop the church from exploding? All demons ahead. Now, people that are involved don't know it. What had done Egypt? Israel and Egypt was not Pharaoh. They were the gods of Egypt.
Well, for more on these, I've now been joined by John Cardinal Onaiyekan, who is the Archbishop Emeritus, Catholic Diocese in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Very warm welcome. Cardinal?
Thank you very much, my brother.
Do you smell a rat too, like your brother, Oyedepo, smelling a rat because of the emergency situations that the world is in now?
People have different sense of smell. I'm not smelling, I do not know what rat he is smelling, but from what I'm gathering, he is smelling a rat in the line of these very, very widespread conspiracy theories as regards some evil forces behind all this. And part of these evil forces will be forces that are out to destroy the Christian faith, and that this will be part of that conspiracy. I wouldn't want to go into that, because if indeed there was such a conspiracy, I think the church and its members are many and strong enough to counteract it. Not to talk about the founder of Christianity, who is more powerful than any conspiracy theory. So from my own point of view, I just look at things the way they present themselves, and then react. And sometimes we hope also are able to give suggestions about what is best for our country. Because the church is part and parcel of the community. And we do hope that those who rule us will recognize that. There are also church leaders who have leadership position and whose leadership position must be recognized and tapped adequately. These are all issues that the COVID-19 is now bringing up for serious discussion.
Should anybody really be vexed about government measures in Nigeria to, mitigate against the spread of this virus, which no cure or vaccine has been made available so far? When you look at the two world's religious centers, in Saudi Arabia, the mosque there is being closed. In Rome, the Vatican too is under locks and keys. So why are we fretting here in Nigeria? The church leaders and even the Muslim leaders.
No, it is the duty of government to protect the life and property of citizens. And when there is a visible and serious danger to life, it is the duty of government to prefer adequate solutions towards such dangers. So nobody would have anything against government putting forward useful measures to preserve the life of citizens. And it is the citizens themselves who will be the first to want their lives to be protected. Mm-hmm. So that is not the issue. The issue, however, is we are talking of a virus that nobody has seen before. And we're told that it has no cure. And we've been told over and over again that even the so-called experts have not been able to tell us exactly what is happening with this thing that we have before us. And this is one of the funny things we have right now on our hands. We keep talking about experts as if the experts themselves are sure of what they are saying. I'm sorry to say that for a long time I have been rather skeptical about these experts.
Why the skepticism?
Because we have seen the results of their advice has not been as successful as we are expecting it to be. There are other issues at stake. But let me come to the issue you raised. You are right. 4 weeks ago, when the government told churches and mosques to shut down, and especially when they brought out this argument that how should you say you cannot close your church when or your mosque, where the greatest churches and mosques in the world have been closed by the higher authorities. Maybe at that time too, we felt that it was the right thing to do. But what I believe that now we are talking now of the 14th of May. And we've had experience of almost 2 months of lockdown. And therefore, the question is, have we not reached a stage now where there should be a different kind of discussion? Already, the government has made changes. That is, otherwise, what are you talking about? Relaxation and changing in the rules that they have put forward. So what is at stake now is to what extent does the changes and relaxation that government has now agreed is necessary in certain areas, to what extent does this affect, can be applied to places of worship? And here's where the tricky part is. Who is it that has the ultimate authority to decide on that issue, whether churches should open or not. And this is the main issue that those of us who believe in God and in our worship, for us, our gathering in church is not just any gathering. And it's often for us who are Christians or Muslims, we feel quite a bit uncomfortable. I wouldn't say angry, uncomfortable.
But edgy too.
Edgy when the churches are put on the same level with clubs and football match games and all that kind
because it's a mass gathering. That's
And
you can see the community spike
well,
right now.
there's
of
mass
COVID-19
gathering, and we have
in
now
Nigeria.
realized that market is a mass gathering. The market is a mass gathering, and government has had reason to make exception for the market as a mass gathering. And we didn't we see mass gathering even with the banks last week. So, in other words, there's no hard and fast rule in these matters. I think our country, our government, eventually, and those who are to advise government, should go beyond the advice of the so-called experts. And we are talking only of experts in the scientific, even in the scientific and in the research area. Very often, even among the scientists, we are now hearing discordant voices. So the scientists have their role to play. But man does not live by science alone. And just like man does not live by bread alone. It is our position and my strong position, and I've consulted with many of my colleagues, that if government has any reason to open markets and banks, and even, especially in the rural areas, people are to go to your farms. And if the reason is that these are essential services, let them...
It's not to kill the economy totally, but
Wait a minute.
to gradually, ease economic difficulties amongst the people and the rest.
I've not finished.
Go on.
If government has reasons to make such decisions with regard to markets, banks, and farms, because they are considered essential services, is government telling us that religious worship is not essential? If the people in government feel that way, they have a right to their opinion, but they should definitely allow those who believe firmly in religion to also express their mind on this matter. And that is why we say there are people for whom, first of all, the gathering for worship is a fundamental right in our constitution.
Absolutely.
All over the world. Therefore, to suspend a fundamental rights requires a very good reason.
Okay. Cardinal,
yes,
would come back and you would expatiate further on your point. We want to take some messages now.
All right.
You're still watching the Rise interview. We'll get plenty more still ahead. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Rise interview with me, Christian Ogodo. Thanks for staying with us. The Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, has called for the reopening of churches closed over the COVID-19 pandemic. The Christian body says it is wrong for the government to continue to close churches when other aspects of national life have started taking shape. The point is that the government cannot separate the religious environment from that of the economy, adding that churches are even more orderly than markets. Now, if religious bodies are allowed to open, their leaders have to re-strategize on how to prevent the spread of the deadly coronavirus. I say have in the studios with me John Cardinal Onaiyekan, who is the Archbishop Emeritus, Catholic Diocese in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. You were talking about the authority of state and that of the church or the religious body. I wish we had your Muslim counterpart here to say, the same thing. But do you realize that the world is now referred to as a new normal? The world has changed forever, at least for now. The way we do things and the rest is totally different.
Yes. In
the times where people probably don't have to go for pilgrimages again. So
it's not going to be a calamity. Now, you've raised the issue about what comes after COVID-19. As you know, there are, if you talk of conspiracy theories, there's also conspiracy theories that involve God. We believe that all this has happened not without the knowledge of God himself, and that God has a purpose behind everything. And some of us believe really that this is an opportunity even given to humanity to change the way of living, so that life will no longer be the same as before. There's no doubt about that. Will it be better than what we had before or worse than what we had before? It is now in our hands to decide when we are returning to post-COVID, how we shall look at the way we have been running things before. What are the things we must change that need to be changed, that will be for the betterment of humanity? Simple example. The people in government now know that it is not right for simple health services to be not available on ground. Will they learn that lesson and work on it in terms of action taken, budget made? I insist that it is no longer tenable that Nigerians have no access to basic health. The big men, even including me, we have no problem with that. We go to private hospitals, no matter how much they charge us, we pay. And if we are not satisfied, we take a flight and go abroad. But that should stop. That should stop. That's one thing we should learn. But come back to the church. The two things. There are the level of how we gradually open churches. I do not think CAN is asking for an immediate return to the crowds that we see worshiping in our churches and mosques. They are simply saying what you have done about markets and banks, and where you put regulations as regards how to gradually return to open, the same should be done with churches and mosques. And in this regard, I'm glad to say that our country has been, we are famous for copying, they say copy paste, for copying what has been happening out there. Well, they should know, because they don't know, that those countries are now opening churches, the ones you referred to originally. Italy has taken steps to reopen churches, but with very clear guidelines, in such a way that churches are open and the demands and precautions for containing the virus are inbuilt in those guidelines. Interestingly enough, the guidelines for Italy was drawn up by the Bishops' Conference and presented to government for its agreement, and the government approved and put it out.
Yes. Are you doing that in Nigeria?
We have started doing that, and you asked whether there is any discussion with government.
Yeah.
I have spoken with the CAN president, and he told me he is always is in touch with the chairman of the PTF. And in these matters, we thought it is actually better if religious bodies work together. It's not even enough that can fight for the reopening of churches. This is an area where I believe we should be able, Christians and Muslims, put their heads together. And it is easier for government to handle if we have a common approach to say, we want the churches open. We want let the responsibility be on church leaders to make sure that when they open, they will only open in such a way that we will maintain the precautions.
The measures put in
place. For example,
by government.
we are also aware that Spain has opened, and one of the measures that Spain has put in is that instead of saying you can only have 20 people gathering, which is what Nigeria has been telling us, and which for us sounds very ridiculous. 20 people in Our Lady Queen of Nigeria Pro Cathedral, and 20 people in a small village church. Somebody is not thinking well. In Spain, the guidelines they have given is that every church can now allow in a third of its installed capacity, which means if your church is meant for 1,500 people, you can only
bring in 500.
For 500, for the simple reason so that with this 500 you can exercise adequate social distancing. The Italian regulation, because I have them in writing, the Italian regulation simply says the pastor in charge of the churches should make sure that they regulate the number of people that go to church in such a way that it does not exceed the possibility of adequate social standing.
Well, in Nigeria, you know, who wants to be turned back from a place of worship that is used to?
But
the other argument, you know, some people are saying the agitation for churches and other religious bodies to open is probably the pecuniary involvement, the financial gains, you know, the tithes, the donations, contributions, and the rest. Because if not, technology is even simplified the way of worship. We'll be in our bedrooms and we can watch via Zoom or WebEx and the rest. So you are not satisfied with that?
No, I think those, I can understand those who either are not familiar with religious worship, or who simply want to be mischievous, talking in that way. The main purpose of worship and the main job of religious leaders is not to make money. There may be people who are doing it for
at least one gave out the church's account number that they should pay their tithes.
But as you know, that has already been happening. But even that has already been happening before COVID-19. We have actually been moving towards people making their contribution to the church online.
Then the worship mode shouldn't be a problem. Why is it really a problem?
The problem, there's a difference between virtual worship and people meeting and praying together.
Is it not the same spiritual conveyance of the message to the Almighty?
Unfortunately, it is not. Because everything religious has a symbolic dimension. And you cannot replace real physical contacts with virtual meeting together. Even those places where we have tried to replace gathering with virtual contacts, you will find that eventually you still want to have a face-to-face discussion.
If you say this, it's like the over 1 billion Catholics in the world should be going to the Vatican anytime the Pope is saying his Mass.
No, not necessary. That is not the situation. Because but the Pope's Mass...
The Mass is still, sent virtually. And whatever blessing anybody gets...
The over 1 billion Catholics will get... The over 1 billion Catholics have hundreds of thousands of priests who are saying hundreds of thousands of masses all over the world. And the Mass of a small, newly ordained Reverend Father in a village has the same value as the Mass of Pope Francis in the Vatican. That is why, whether you are following the Pope directly and you are there, or you are following online, doesn't really make much of a difference.
So why does it make much of a difference? But
when we are talking about our daily spiritual bread, give us this day our daily bread. When we are talking about daily spiritual bread, we have agreed to suspend our rights for gathering for this purpose. Now, if this purpose can be achieved without suspending our rights to gather, we insist that our rights be restored, the right to gather. Then we can begin to discuss, maybe argue, negotiate over conditions. I think that is what we should be talking about now. And
that is what you want to, want a joint presentation between CAN and
yes, and I think
Nigerian
government,
Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs.
Both and religious leaders should actually put their heads together and fashion some kind of protocol which we can present to government. Because if we are going to leave the government to do this, it is not really within their jurisdiction. They are not the ones to tell people how to worship. If you look at the protocol issued by in Italy, Italy is largely Catholic, so everything there was about the Catholic worship. Mm-hmm. That kind of protocol cannot be issued by any government. It can only be issued by a church institution. The same way here, we in Nigeria, Christians, even within our Christian groups, we have different ways of worship. But I think we have sufficiently common ground to be able to come out with some common ideas that will take into consideration the precautions necessary to contain the virus. People should please be told that religious leaders are no less concerned about the safety of their congregation as anybody else is.
Particularly even with the Catholic Church donating 426 hospitals.
We are doing
all
our
over the
best.
country.
We are making them available.
Yeah, making them available.
If needed.
Yeah.
Please let it be clear, we didn't donate them.
No, making them available. Yeah.
We are making them available.
Yeah.
If they are needed right now,
Sure.
they'll be, with other conditions, they can use them for the time being. But that just shows our readiness to go. And therefore, there is no lack of goodwill. And the government, by the way, is not a group of extraterrestrial body out there. They are part and parcel of us. Yeah. And I think if they admit that there are certain things that they should leave for the competence of religious organizations to come out with a reasonable measures,
okay,
then it should be accepted.
They should contact you. Thanks. Like always, always a delight to have you as a guest.
Very much. Yes.
John Cardinal Onaiyekan is the Archbishop Emeritus, the Catholic Diocese of Abuja in Nigeria.
And I just want to say, whatever you say, don't forget, we must pray to God to get us over this problem.
All right.
And today, 14th of May, the Pope and all the religious leaders in the world are praying.
All right, okay. You're still watching the Rise interview. We've got more still ahead. Stay with us.